Hello, I'm Grady Smith. I'm one of the ministers on staff here at Northeast. Noah and Cassidy and about 40 or 50 others of our congregation are at a retreat and a camp out this weekend, so they are not here this morning. And that gives me the opportunity to get up here and talk to you this morning. I bet you just never imagined that you would come to church and see a clip from the very first full-length Disney animated movie. All right? 1937. 1937. That's an old movie. Took 4 years to produce. Back then cost $1.5 million to produce it. And back then, $1.5 million, that was a lot of money. And yet, 80, or however many, you do the math, years later, we think about work, and you think about working with a good attitude or a disposition, and almost all of us, no matter what age we are, we know that song, don't we? Whistle while you work. Is it that easy? Labor Day. What is Labor Day all about? Well, it did not become an official national holiday until 1894 under President Grover Cleveland. And it was celebrated in various ways before then. But I know for many of us, Labor Day weekend, we aren't thinking about labor that much. We aren't thinking about work that much. We're thinking about barbecues and family. Our son and daughter-in-law are here this weekend. It's great having them and the grandkids from down in Nashville. But there's a point to this, and that is this. Number one, nobody's going to forget. You're not going to forget this sermon, right? Because it's a sermon. Grady played a clip from a Disney movie, and then that will make you think of work, and then that will make you think of the points I want to make about work, right? So there's a method to this madness this morning. The average worker in the workforce will work before they retire 750,000 hours. Think about that for a minute. Like, I think the stats I saw are like 768,000 hours. 750,000 hours on the workplace in your lifetime. And then that got me to thinking with this weekend and what sermon I wanted to do. I wanted to preach a sermon that will help you more deeply appreciate what it means to work and the value of work and the satisfaction you derive in the work that you do. And work is so much more than going to a job and getting a paycheck. You know, work covers a whole lot of things, and I'll talk about some of them this morning. But how much satisfaction do you get out of work? Whether you're retired and you're doing other activities, or you're working as a stay-at-home mom or a parent, whatever. How much satisfaction do you get out of work? And a lot of people are working and they're not satisfied. Statistics bear that out. I read an article a couple of weeks ago when I was preparing for this lesson that said that almost half of Gen Zers are not satisfied and happy and content in the work that they do. How many Gen Zers do we have with us this morning? None. We don't have a single Gen Zer. They're all camping. Okay, all our Gen Zers are camping this morning. I mean, that's not good. That really isn't good. I want to be happy. I want to be content. I want to be satisfied. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And every one of us, when we think about work or a job, we think about this idea of a dream job. And I don't know what your dream job is, but the closest thing I ever came to a dream job was when I went to school at Lipscomb, and there was a place across the street called the Donut Den, and it's still there. And I got a job working there about 6 months. And I had the closing shift, and what I got to do is basically there were hardly any customers who ever came in, so I was not that busy doing anything. Mr. Fox, who was the owner of the place, said, you can have all the donuts you want while you're working here. And so I gained about 10 pounds in 6 months. And that was a sweet job, no pun intended. I just thought of that. That was a sweet job. We have a member here, Rebecca Reinhardt. And the Reinhardts, they must not be here this morning. Maybe they're traveling. Maybe they're on the retreat, the camp out. But she works at Kroger, and her job is to come up with flavors of ice cream and test those flavors of ice cream for Kroger. So I'll come up to her and I say, what are you working on this week? And she'll say, I'm working on a shortbread peach cream ice cream. And I said, you must love your job. How much do you like your job? How much do you like your work? It's important. And so here's the main premise of everything that I'm going to share with you this morning. And that is this. God works and creates. The God we serve, the God we worship, He is a creator and He is a worker. You go to the creation account in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, you see God creating the world, creating the universe, taking what is formless and void and working. And so it says that He worked 6 days, and on the seventh day He rested. But look at what was accomplished in His creation. But it's not just that. It's what God created, He looked at, and He was satisfied in what He did. And so each day in this creation narrative, we have God doing the work of creation and then looking at it and saying, this is good. And God saw it. And it was good, what He created. And then the last day of the work of creation, we have mankind being created, and we have this statement that God looked at it and God saw that it was what? Do you know what it says now? Very good. Human beings, the crown of creation. And God calls us into the same work. Now, not exactly the same. I can't create something out of nothing. I can't create life from non-life. And yet, notice what's said in the account in Genesis 1. It says, so God created mankind in His own image, in the image of God. He created them, both male and female. He created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So very early on, God calls human beings, called Adam and Eve into this working, cooperative partnership with Him. In being stewards in what is going on in this world and having a dominion over a part of this world and sharing in that work. And from our reading this morning, God took the man, put him in the garden to do what? To work it, to take care of it. And then God said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. So then there's this idea of a partnership in marriage, a man and a woman partnering together to engage together in this work. And so there was this garden, and there's a statement made in the early chapters of Genesis that no one was there to tend it. And I don't think the point is that God makes this garden with the fruit and the trees, and then God said, oh, man, I really don't want to work this garden. I'm going to create somebody to take care of it. I really don't want to do that. That's not the point at all. And so from the very beginning, implanted within us as a part of what it means to be created in the image of God is to engage in work, in labor that is productive, that is fruitful. And this idea of being fruitful and multiplying, it's not just talking about procreation, it's this idea of us being involved and working in and being a part of what's effective and what is productive. There is glory in that work. And so the curse is not work. Work is a part of God's original design. It is good. And I'll talk in a minute about why it's good. But yes, there was a curse. There was a fall. There was a sin. There was the eating of the forbidden fruit, and then a curse that was placed upon mankind and even upon the work that man does. God says, you will work harder. You will sweat from your brow. There will be thorns and thistles. Mankind needed to remember that there is a consequence to sin, and it's serious. And part of that curse relates to work. So the next time you're frustrated at work, or the next time you're feeling like you're working and spinning your wheels, or you're not feeling good in the work that you're doing, and you wish you were doing something else. And why do I have to work with all these difficult people who make life so hard for me at work? And why do I have this dead-end job? You can go all the way back to creation and what happened right after that. The frustrations, we're a part of a fallen, broken world. Now, it's still a good world. But we see those consequences now. But we don't just see it in what God calls us to do. We see it in all of God's creation. Think about this. Observe the world. Go to your backyard and that irritating spider web that some spider worked on. You walk on the back patio or the deck and, sorry thing, let's get the bug spray. And sometimes I think weird things like this, but I wonder, what is that spider thinking right now? He did all that work, made that beautiful spider web, and then somebody comes and messes it up or kills him. Does that spider go, oh man, I worked hard on this thing and now you're destroying it? But that's not the point. You see it in all of creation. This working, this functionality, this creating things. Beavers building a dam, a spider building a web, ants harvesting food for the nest. In fact, you go to a passage like this one in Proverbs 6, and ants are held up as an example for us in engaging in work and not being slothful, in being purposeful and intentional in the things that we do. Consider the ways of the ant. It has no commander or overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food in the harvest. So there are lessons even then for us. And so that brings me to this question. Why is work so important? Why does it matter? And there's some self-evident answers to that. I mean, you think about it. How did you get here this morning? Well, you had to do some work, didn't you? Maybe you didn't even think about it, but you had to go to the kitchen, you got a bowl, you poured some cereal, you exerted yourself and when you took a shower and put on your clothes, and then you helped your kids do the same. I mean, that gets at part of what I'm talking about. But what I want to do, I want to look at three things very quickly that remind us why work is so important. And the first one is this: good work brings order and design out of disorder and chaos. Once again, go back to the original account of creation, and it says God saw the formless and void and darkness. And the word there, it describes this idea of chaos and disorder. And then God created something. He brought order and design out of disorder and chaos. And you see it in so many ways. I mean, you think about the ecosystems and the systems related to the solar system and the universe, and it's like clockwork. And so God creates this design that's built into the world that we live in. We can set our watches and our time based on what we see out in the universe. There is this order to creation that is magnificent. And then there's this. How many of you know what that is? Okay, I'll tell you. It is deoxyribonucleic acid. Charlie, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Charlie Cruz, our resident scientist. We have other ones, but okay, DNA. That's what it is. That's DNA. And here's an amazing thing about DNA. In the most basic, rudimentary part of what is a part of all living organisms, plant, animal, insects, human beings, they all have DNA, and it is an acid that is within the nucleus of a cell. And I'm no scientist, okay, and this is not a science lesson, but to me, the discovery and the functionality of DNA, in my mind, study it deeply sometime, please do, because I believe if you study it deeply, you're going to become more pulled into this idea that it didn't just happen. It's not just random chance with lifeless matter that produced what we experience. The wonder of life. And within this tiny, little, small bit of acid that's in a nucleus of a cell, I printed this out. DNA is often compared to a computer program providing instructions for building the human body. If it were a computer program, DNA would be the largest and most complex computer program ever written. Now you think about that. And a lot of people had this idea, if you go more basic and, people who believe in atheistic evolution and everything just happened by chance and life came from non-life and it was just a chance that it was able to continue to live, and then it learned to produce itself, and then after it learned to reproduce itself and have a reproductive system, then it decided that it wanted eyes, or it needed eyes to see things, and all this just happened. But you go into this most rudimentary part of a cell, and it is so complex. It's a program. It's a design. It is the building blocks for how things live, survive, how they work, and it's complex. But the point I'm making, it's about order and design out of chaos. And that's a part of what we do. And there's so many examples of that, but here's just a simple, rudimentary example of what I'm talking about. How many of you have these jobs or these tasks or these to-do lists to do, and you know you need to do them and you put them off and you think, oh yeah, one of these days I'm gonna do this, and Jeannie will bring something up to me. I say, yeah, someday we need to do that. Now, love, what are we having for dinner? But once you do them, how do you feel? You feel good. You feel satisfied. Now you can find your shoes or your clothes. And so there's so many things that we do that it's a part of what God has implanted within us to create order and design out of chaos. It's the same things that my grandsons do. And the granddaughters aren't as interested in Lego as the boys. I'm not saying girls can't be interested in Legos, but it's my grandsons. They love Legos. Ike, you love Legos, don't you? James, all of them. Luke, Barrett. And it amazes me what they can do with all these random blocks that are basically nothing. They connect, and look what you create. And they get this sense of satisfaction in creating something like that. And here's the second thing. Good work is useful and productive for yourself and others. And the first point's related to the second point. Work is helpful. Work is good. It's good for ourselves. It's good for others. I believe that kids ought to have jobs and tasks and chores and things to do. And we ought to teach them the satisfaction, whether allowance is involved or not. It's just idea of being productive and getting a sense of satisfaction in doing something that's good for them and good for others. When I was a young teenager, my father made an agreement with me I think I may have told you this story before, but I'll tell you again. He said, okay, if you cut our grass and keep our yard neat and do everything that needs to be done in our yard, I will let you use the lawnmower and I will pay for your gas to mow other people's lawns. So me and a buddy of mine there in Huntsville, we had our own little lawn mowing business when we were like 13, 14, 15 years old. And man, I tell you what, we made goo boodles of money. It felt good. I saved up enough money that I could buy, with Dad co-signing a loan for me, to get my first car, 69 Grand Prix. Yeah, 404 barrel, that baby would go. One tank of gas would last about half a day, and that was back during the energy crisis. But it was a good feeling. And I enjoyed it when I got a little bit older. And then, I could drive. Early on when I was doing this, I couldn't drive yet, but then I finally was able to drive, and then I bought a car. And me and my buddy would go down to Pizza Inn, their buffet, and we would go at 11 and we'd stay till 2. And we would just because we had, $3 or $1.50, whatever it was, you could have all the pizza you wanted, so we got our money's worth. But that was the rewards. It was the fruit of our labor. And there's so many areas when we do things and there's a positive result and it blesses not only us, but it blesses others. Just think very quickly about the milk that you pick up in the grocery store. Think about the different people that were involved in that process to get the milk on the shelf, that you go up and you exert work in lifting the milk and putting it in your cart and pushing it. It's just this work, this productivity from the little calf that's born. And this is the job right here. See this little calf feeding on this bottle. When Jeannie and I first started dating, Jeannie was still doing that on the farm. She was still feeding calves. I wouldn't go near them. They would slobber and it was nasty and I didn't like it at all. But Jeannie played a role in blessing many people in bringing it to this point. And then you think of the truck drivers, the people who stock the grocery shelves. So, there's a theological term that's sometimes used for this. It's called common grace. And it goes to this idea of producing something that's helpful for all. I need to move on. And here's the last one here. Good work enhances our experience of beauty, enjoyment, and pleasure. And we often don't think of this when we think about the work that we do. If you're talking to me, I'm usually thinking about functionality. What works, what doesn't work, what functions, and get something done. There's an element to creation and being involved in work that enhances our experience of beauty, enjoyment, and pleasure in life. And you don't have to look any farther than the way God made this world and the way God created creatures. Do you ever think about that? Couldn't he have made, all animals look the same? But they're also different, and they're also beautiful in their own way. I can't help but think of the song Louis Armstrong, "What a Wonderful World." I see trees of green and red roses too, and I forget the rest of the words, but he says, "What a wonderful world." The rainbow. There is this idea built into creation, and we are a part of that helps enhance and create beauty in the world. And a part of that, I'm not geared as much that way as Jeannie is. And so I think I've discovered why Jeannie will say, "I'm getting 2 new lamps." And the first thing I say is, "Why do we need 2 new lamps? What, did these break? They're functional. Why do we need to spend such and such money to buy new lamps?" And she says, "They don't look good anymore." Or I forget what she says. "These are old," or "they're out of style." And there used to be an arrogant part of me that kind of looked down on her, like, I'm not materialistic. I'd be content. But it's not that way. I was wrong to feel that way. Because there is an element of work that is just making something attractive and beautiful and pleasurable. And that may include getting new lamps that you feel like you don't need. We haven't argued about it or anything. She's used her own money to pay for it. So think about so many things that we do creates this beauty and pleasure and enhances happiness. Whether you're an architect creating this building, I think it's in Seoul, South Korea, it's called the hashtag building. And I assume it's functional. But I believe this desire to create something like that, or a beautiful piece of art, or to plant a flower garden and enjoy the flowers and the beauty of that realm. It isn't just about when you plant flowers, you think, I'm going to do my part for pollination. And the only reason I'm planting these flowers is to help pollination and help the bees and help. No. You're creating something beautiful. And that's true of music. Think about how powerful music is, to take those notes and those words and to put them together to create something powerful and moving. So many levels. And, I tell you what, I thought as I prepared, and I worked hard on this lesson, by the way. I put effort into it. When I was working on it, I thought, I'm going to barely have time for my main thrust at the end, but that's okay. Because I think I've accomplished one thing that I've wanted you to do, and I want you to have a different attitude about work and how you view what you do and the difference it makes. But I want you to understand that in this context. When Paul says in Colossians 3, whatever you do in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. Now let me ask you this. What's excluded from that? Gene, what do you want to exclude from that instruction? Can you exclude anything? You can exclude, don't do what's sinful. When we're talking about work, I think any work is valuable if it's not sinful or harmful or illegal, okay? And so when you see that verse, I don't want you to think that, I'm not engaged in spiritual stuff. All I do is process loans. Because that's not the case. Because you can take what you do, wherever it is, with whoever you have contact with, and you can view it not out of this dualism that says this, when we're at church, it's spiritual, and then when we're at work, it's secular. It says whatever you do. And so remember, your workplace, wherever it is, whatever work you're doing, your workplace is God's space. And it's lifted to an even higher level in Jesus. That's true if you're caring for a baby, if you're playing sports. You can do that to God's glory if that's your job. Or if you're digging ditches or cleaning toilets. Paul could tell servants, slaves in the first century, as he gives instructions a little bit further on in terms of what they're doing, remember that ultimately you're serving the Lord. You're not serving that master. And you need to be conscientious in what you do. And he speaks to masters as well and says, masters, you need to do what's right and you need to do what's fair because you have a master as well. And he's saying you can influence others by the way you work. So vocation is mission. We use these terms. We talk about church work. Church work. When is it not spiritual or church work? If you're doing it for God's glory and you're living in the moment, not thinking about what's next and letting that sidetrack. I have a terrible job. So right now, maybe you want a new job. Maybe you need a new job. Maybe it's time to change. But in the meantime, don't allow the what's next make you miss the what's now. Because right now you can serve and minister in anything that you do. I think of Joseph being sold into slavery, Old Testament story. He was where he didn't want to be. His brothers sold him into slavery. He's in Egypt. He's alone. But what does he do when he's there? He's still giving glory to God by the way that he's living and by what he's doing. And God ultimately used him because he pursued excellence at all times. Doing the best we can in the circumstances where we are. And I can't emphasize that enough. Sometimes we're rewarded, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're recognized, sometimes we're not. If you're not, that's okay. You do your best to the glory of God, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And that is ministry in what you're doing. And finally, last but not least, I did get through it. Not bad. Ultimately, remember you're in the people business. Don't forget that what you do and where you were placed and where God has planted you, God has entrusted you in your workplace, whether it's at home or at school or at the office or wherever it is. God has placed you in a place where you can make an impact and have an impact on others and engage in the ministry, the mission of vocation. And we talk about doing a service project, and we go to City Gospel Mission, and that's spiritual. But a service project is when you go to work and you live and reflect and show Christ and help people know Christ. It's a mission. And don't forget this. Let's go back to God and close with this thought. Don't forget that God is working, has worked, continues to work, and is working in you to accomplish His purposes. And the statements made by Paul in Philippians 1:6, being confident of this, that He who began a good work in you will carry it into completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Let God continue His good work in you. Jesus is a master builder. And I think of the 15 or 20 years he spent in the carpenter's shop. And we sometimes we just speed past that and say, well, he got to the really important things after that. And he did. Ultimately, he came to die for us and be raised for us so that we could live and be made new. But don't discount what he did in the carpenter's shop, because I'm sure that he who helped fashion and create the project of this world and this universe carefully considered what he did as he made the furniture or the tool that others used. He was glorifying God in the carpenter's shop. I'm glad that's not where it ended. And so he did what he did to make us new. It says, we are his workmanship. Ephesians 2:10 says, we are his project. We are his work of art, created in Christ Jesus for good works, wherever we are. We want to help you get there. I don't know where you are on your journey. Maybe right now you're just now thinking about what it means to follow God, and you've looked into it a little bit and there are questions you have. I encourage you to just keep looking and searching and contact us. We will help you and encourage you on that journey. I'm not saying that I have all the answers to everything you could ever ask. Only God has all the answers, but I believe I have one important answer, and that's Jesus. You're created for God. And your choices, your sin has separated you from God, and you need him. But he's created a way for you to be recreated and reworked so you can live for his honor and glory and live with him forever. Maybe you're ready to be baptized. And you can let us know after worship this morning. We'll go right up here and we'll immerse you into Jesus. You're ready to make that commitment. Whatever that need is, let us know. We have an elder in this room right over here, a shepherd, to meet with you and pray with you if you need prayer. So thank you for paying attention. Please don't just remember the clip I played at the beginning to get your attention. Think about what it means as you're working this week. Let's stand and sing.